Amara had always believed that life would get easier someday. It never did. She lived in the kind of silence that comes after too many disappointments. Her apartment was small, the walls thin enough to hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. The paint peeled in the corners. The faucet dripped no matter how tightly she turned it. She worked double shifts at the hospital, came home to instant noodles and cold showers, and told herself that surviving was enough. It wasn't, but she had learned not to ask for more. The night it happened, she was driving home from her shift. The highway was empty, the kind of empty that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. Her hands gripped the steering wheel loosely. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. The radio played something low and forgettable. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular. She was just moving through the motions of living, the way she always did. And then she saw the fire. It started as a flicker in the distance, orange against the black sky. At first, she thought it was a streetlight, or maybe a bonfire somewhere off the road. But as she got closer, the flicker grew into flames. Tall, wild, eating the night. Her foot eased off the gas. There was a car on the side of the road, twisted and smoking. The front end was crumpled against a guardrail. The windshield was shattered. And the flames were crawling up from the engine, licking at the hood, spreading fast. She should have kept driving. That's what anyone with sense would have done. Call it in, let the authorities handle it, go home and forget. But Amara had spent too many years watching people slip away in hospital beds, the hands going cold in hers, the breath fading into nothing. She had learned that seconds mattered, that hesitation could mean the difference between life and something permanent. So she pulled over. She left her car running, the door hanging open, and she ran toward the wreck. The heat hit her before she even got close. It was suffocating, thick, like trying to breathe through a wool blanket. The smoke stung her eyes. She squinted through it, searching for movement, for any sign of life. And then she saw him. He was slumped over the steering wheel, his head turned to the side, blood running down his temple. His hands were limp in his lap. His chest rose and fell, barely, but enough to matter. She didn't think. She just moved. The door was jammed. She yanked at it once, twice, her hand slipping on the hot metal. The flames were louder now, roaring, consuming. She braced her foot against the side of the car and pulled with everything she had. The door gave way with a shriek of metal, and she stumbled back, catching herself just in time. She reached in and grabbed him under the arms. He was heavy, solid, all muscle and dead weight. She pulled, dragged, her shoes slipping on the gravel. The fire was close now, so close she could feel it on her back, could smell her own hair starting to singe. And then she had him out. She dragged him across the road, away from the car, away from the flames. Her lungs burned. Her arms shook. She dropped to her knees beside him, gasping, coughing, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. It was there, faint, but there. Behind her, the car exploded. The force of it threw her forward, the sound deafening, the heat like a wall. She covered her head with her arms, felt the rush of hot air blow past her, felt the ground shake beneath her knees. And then, silence. Not real silence. The fire still crackled. The wind still whispered through the trees. But the moment had passed. The crisis had peaked and broken, and now there was only the aftermath. She looked down at the man beside her. His face was sharp, even covered in blood and soot. Strong jaw, dark brows, a scar along his cheekbone that looked old, deliberate. His clothes were expensive. She could tell even through the dote and smoke. Tailored, black, the kind of clothes that didn't belong on a highway in the middle of nowhere. She didn't know who he was, but she had saved him, and that, she would come to understand, changed everything. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. She called for help, sat with him until the ambulance arrived, watched as they loaded him onto a stretcher, their movements quick and practiced. They asked her questions. What happened? How long ago? Was he conscious? And she answered in a voice that didn't feel like her own. Flat. Mechanical. The adrenaline was already starting to fade, leaving behind a hollowness that made her limbs feel too heavy. They told her she'd saved his life. She nodded, didn't say anything, just got back in her car and drove home. She didn't think about him again that night. Or at least, she tried not to. She showered, scrubbed the smoke out of her hair, watched the water tan gray at her feet. She crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling until her eyes finally closed. But the smell of burning metal stayed with her, and so did the image of his face. 3 days later, she was making coffee in her tiny kitchen when she heard the knock. It wasn't a normal knock. It was too deliberate, too heavy, the kind of knock that made her heart skip before her mind could catch up. She opened the door. There were 5 of them, men in dark suits, their faces unreadable. They didn't smile, didn't speak, just stood there, filling the narrow hallway with their presence. And behind them, leaning against a black car parked at the curb, was him. He was standing now, alive. The blood was gone, replaced by a fresh bandage at his temple. He wore a long coat that moved with the wind, and his eyes, dark, sharp, unyielding, were fixed on her. She felt her breath catch. He pushed off the car and walked toward her, slow and steady, like a man who had all the time in the world. The men parted for him without a word. He stopped at the base of her steps, looked up at her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then he smiled. It was a strange smile, not warm, not cold, just knowing. "You saved my life," he said. His voice was low, rough around the edges, like gravel wrapped in silk. She nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. "I don't forget debts," he said. And that was when Amora realized that pulling him from that fire hadn't been an act of mercy. It had been a mistake. His name was Dante. She learned that much before he left. Dante Moetti. He said it like it should mean something, and maybe it did, but she didn't know enough about the world he came from to understand why. He didn't ask if he could come in. He just looked at her, waiting, and somehow that look was enough to make her step aside. The men stayed outside. She noticed that. Noticed the way they positioned themselves along the street, not threatening, but present, watching. Her apartment felt even smaller with him in it. He stood in the center of her living room, his coat still on, his hands in his pockets. He didn't sit, didn't touch anything, just looked around slowly, taking it all in. The worn couch, the stack of medical textbooks on the coffee table, the dishes drying by the sink. She stayed by the door, her arms crossed over her chest. "You didn't have to come here," she said. "I know," he replied. "I don't want anything from you." "I know that too." He turned to face her then, and the weight of his gaze made her want to look away. But she didn't. She held it, even though her pulse was racing, even though every instinct told her this man was dangerous. "You pulled me out of that car," he said. "You could have died." "I didn't." "But you could have." She didn't respond to that. What was there to say? Yes, she could have died. She knew that. She had known it the moment she ran toward those flames. But she had done it anyway, because that was who she was. That was who she had always been. He took a step closer. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "No." "Good." He smiled again, that same strange smile. "Keep it that way." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Thick, white, sealed. He set it on the coffee table between them, then stepped back. "What is that?" she asked. Thank you." "I don't want your money." "It's not about what you want." She stayed at the envelope, her jaw tight. She wanted to tell him to take it back. Wanted to throw it at him, tell him to leave, tell him she didn't need his charity or his gratitude or whatever this was. But the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, she did need it. She was drowning in debt. Medical school loans. Her mother's funeral costs. The rent she was 3 weeks late on. She worked herself to the bone and still couldn't keep her head above water. That envelope could change everything. And he knew it. "You don't have to decide now," he said, his voice softer. But it's there. If you need it. He moved toward the door, and she stepped aside again, letting him pass. He paused in the doorway, looked back at her one last time. I owe you my life, Amora, he said. That's not a debt I take lightly. She blinked. How do you know my name? He didn't answer, just smiled, tipped his head in something like a goodbye, and walked out. The door closed behind him, and she stood there in the sudden silence, staring at the envelope on her coffee table like it might explode. She didn't open it that night, but she didn't throw it away either. 2 weeks passed. She tried to forget about him, tried to go back to the rhythm of her life, the hospital, the exhaustion, the endless cycle of saving people who didn't know her name. But Dante Moetti had left a mark, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The envelope sat untouched on her coffee table. Every day, she walked past it. Every day, she told herself she didn't need it. And every day, the weight of her unpaid bills grew heavier. She was coming home from a late shift when she saw them again. Not Dante. His men. They were parked outside her building, the same black car, the same expressionless faces. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his jaw, stepped out as she approached. Miss Amora, he said. His voice was polite, but there was no warmth in it. She stopped. What do you want? Mr. Moetti asked us to check on you. I'm fine. Are you? She didn't answer. The man's eyes flicked to her apartment window, then back to her. He wants to make sure you're safe, he said. Safe from what? He didn't respond to that, just nodded, got back in the car, and drove away. She stood there on the sidewalk, her heart pounding, her hands clenched into fists. What the hell had she gotten herself into? That night, she opened the envelope. Inside was cash. More cash than she had ever seen in one place. Tens of thousands, maybe more. Enough to pay off her debts. Enough to breathe again. And tucked beneath the bills, a single note. Asterisk, you saved me. Let me return the favor. Asterisk. No signature. Just those words, written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. She sat on the edge of her couch, the money spread out in front of her, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Relief, guilt, fear, all of it tangled together, choking her. She didn't sleep that night. And when the sun rose, she knew that whatever line she had crossed by pulling Dante Moetti from that fire, there was no going back now. She used the money. Not all of it. Not at first. But enough. Enough to pay her landlord, to clear the overdue notices that had been piling up like gravestones. Enough to buy groceries without checking her bank account first. Enough to breathe without the constant tightness in her chest. It should have felt like freedom. It didn't. Because every time she spent $1 of Dante Moetti's money, she felt the weight of it. The obligation. The unspoken agreement she had never consented to but had accepted the moment she opened that envelope. She told herself it was fine. That she didn't owe him anything beyond gratitude. That this was just a one-time thing, a transaction, and once the money was gone, so would he be. But Dante didn't disappear. He didn't show up at her door again. Didn't call. Didn't send letters. But his presence lingered like smoke. She saw his men around her neighborhood now. Not every day, but enough. Sitting in parked cars. Standing on street corners. Never approaching her. Never speaking. Just there. Watching. At first, she thought she was being paranoid. That she was imagining things. Seeing shadows where there were none. But the third time she spotted the same man outside the hospital where she worked, she knew. They were following her. Not threatening her. Not bothering her. Just keeping an eye on her. Like she was something valuable. Something that needed protecting. It made her skin crawl. She confronted one of them finally, a week later. Walked right up to the car parked outside her building and knocked on the window. The man inside looked up at her, his expression unreadable. Why are you following me? She demanded. He rolled down the window. We're not following you, Miss, we're protecting you. From what? You don't need to worry about that. That's not an answer. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Moetti wants to make sure you're safe. That's all. I didn't ask for this. No, he agreed. But you have it anyway. He rolled the window back up, and she stood there, furious and helpless, knowing that no amount of arguing would change anything. Dante Moetti had decided she needed protection. And what Dante decided, apparently, became reality. She tried to find him. It wasn't easy. He didn't have a listed address, didn't show up in any public record she could access. She asked around the hospital, casually, carefully, mentioning his name to a few of the older nurses who had lived in the city longer than she had. The reactions were always the same. Silence, a flicker of recognition, and then a quick change of subject. One of the nurses, a woman named Claire who had always been kind to her, pulled her aside after a shift. Why are you asking about Dante Moetti? Claire's voice was low, urgent. I know him. Sort of. Then you need to stop asking questions. Why? Claire looked around, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in closer. Because men like him don't like being looked into. And if you're smart, you'll stay as far away from him as possible. Who is he? Claire hesitated. Then, quietly, someone you don't want to owe. She didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. The warning was clear. But it was too late. Amora already owed him. And whether she liked it or not, the debt had tied her to him in ways she was only beginning to understand. 3 weeks after the fire, he came back. She was walking home from the grocery store, her arms full of bags, when the black car pulled up beside her. The back door opened, and there he was, Dante Moetti, alive, whole, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Get in, he said. It wasn't a request. She stared at him, her heart pounding. No, Amora. His voice was calm, patient. Get in the car. I don't take orders from you. I know. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes never leaving hers. But you're going to get in anyway. She should have walked away, should have turned around, gone home, locked the door, and never looked back. But there was something in his voice, not a threat, not a command, just certainty. Like he knew her better than she knew herself. And maybe he did, because she got in. The door closed behind her, and the car pulled away from the curb. She set the grocery bags on the floor, her hand shaking, and looked at him. Where are we going? Nowhere, he said. I just wanted to talk. You could have called. I don't have your number. You know where I live. You know where I work. You know my goddamn name without me telling you. I'm sure you have my number. He smiled at that. A real smile, the first one she'd seen from him. Fair point. She crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. What do you want? To make sure you're okay. I'm fine. You're not. She bristled. You don't know me. I know enough. He reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. Sleek, black, expensive. He held it out to her. What is this? She asked. A phone. I have a phone. Not like this one. He set it on the seat between them. It's secure, untraceable. If you ever need anything, if you're ever in trouble, you call me. The number's already programmed in. She stayed at the phone. I don't need this. You might. Why would I be in trouble? He didn't answer, just looked at her, his expression unreadable. And that was when it hit her. The protection, the money, the men watching her. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't gratitude. It was insurance, because by saving his life, she had become connected to him. And in his world, connections were liabilities. What did you drag me into? She whispered. Nothing, he said softly. Not yet. The car stopped outside her building. The door opened. He nodded toward it. Go home, Amora, he said, and take the phone. She grabbed her groceries, grabbed the phone, and got out without another word. The car drove away, and she stood there on the sidewalk, the phone heavy in her hand, knowing that no matter how many times she told herself she was free, the leash had already been placed around her neck. If this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end. She didn't use the phone. Not at first. It sat on her nightstand, dark and silent, like a promise she wasn't ready to keep. She told herself she didn't need it, told herself that Dante was just being paranoid, that whatever world he lived in had nothing to do with her. But the feeling of being watched never went away. His men were still there, still parked outside her building, still following her to work, to the store, to the coffee shop she went to on Sunday mornings. She stopped confronting them. It didn't do any good. They were polite, professional, immovable. And slowly, against her will, she started to feel safer. That was the worst part. She hated that she felt safer. Hated that she had begun to notice when they weren't there, that she checked for the black car before she left her apartment each morning. Hated that some small, traitorous part of her brain had started to accept this strange, suffocating protection as normal, because it wasn't normal, and she knew it. One night, she was closing up at the hospital when her supervisor called her into the office. Dr. Patel was a kind man, soft-spoken, the type who remembered birthdays and asked about your family. He looked tired tonight, more than tired, worried. Amara, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Sit down. She sat, her stomach twisting. Is something wrong? She asked. He hesitated, folded his hands on the desk. I got a call today, from someone asking about you. Her pulse quickened. Who? They didn't give a name. Just wanted to know your schedule, when you worked, where you lived. The air left her lungs. What did you tell them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing, he said quickly. I told them I couldn't give out that information. But Amora. He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. Is everything okay? Are you in some kind of trouble? She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him she was fine, that it was nothing, that he didn't need to worry. But the words wouldn't come, because she didn't know if she was in trouble. She didn't know what Dante's world looked like, didn't know who his enemies were, or what they might do to get to him. But she was starting to understand that by being connected to him, she had become a target. I'm fine, she lied. It's probably just a mistake. Dr. Patel didn't look convinced, but he nodded. If you need anything, time off, a different schedule, anything, you let me know. She thanked him and left, her hands shaking as she walked to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm her breathing. And then she pulled out the phone. She stayed at it, at the single contact saved in the system. Just a name. Dante **. She pressed call before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the first ring. Amora. His voice was calm, unsurprised, like he had been waiting for this. Someone's asking about me, she said, her voice tight. At the hospital. They wanted to know my schedule. There was a pause. Then, where are you? In the parking lot. At work. Stay there. I'm sending someone. No, I don't want. Stay there, he said again, firmer this time. Please. The line went dead. She sat there, her heart pounding, and 5 minutes later, 2 cars pulled into the parking lot. Not his men this time. Dante himself. He stepped out of the first car, his coat billowing in the wind, and walked straight to her. He opened her door without asking. Get out, he said. I'm not. Amora. His voice was softer now. Please. She got out. He looked her over, his eyes sharp, searching. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not. He glanced around the parking lot, his jaw tight. Come with me. I have my car. Leave it. Someone will bring it to you. Dante. Please, he said again, and there was something in his voice that stopped her. Not pleading, not demanding, just honest. She followed him to his car. He didn't take her home. He took her to a house on the edge of the city, surrounded by trees and high walls. It was beautiful in a cold, distant way, all stone and glass and sharp edges. His men were everywhere, guarding the gate, walking the perimeter, standing in the shadows. She felt her stomach drop. What is this place? She asked as they pulled up to the entrance. Somewhere safe, he said. He led her inside, through hallways that smelled like leather and would smoke, into a sitting room with tall windows and a fireplace that crackled softly. He gestured to a chair. Sit, he said. She didn't. I want to go home. You can't. You can't just keep me here. I'm not keeping you, he said quietly. I'm protecting you. From what? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, ran a hand through his dark hair, and sat down on the edge of the couch. Do you know why someone pulled me off that road and tried to kill me? He asked. She shook her head. Because in my world, power is currency, and I have a lot of it, which means I have a lot of enemies. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You saved my life, and now, whether you like it or not, those enemies see you as a way to hurt me. I didn't ask for this. I know. Then let me go. Let me disappear. Forget you ever met me. He looked up at her, his eyes dark and sad. I can't. Why not? Because they already know about you. The words hit her like a fist to the chest. How? She whispered. I don't know, but they do. And until I find out who's behind this, you're not safe out there. She sank into the chair, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. How long? I don't know. She closed her eyes, felt the tears prick at the edges. This isn't Faye. No, he agreed. It's not. He stood, moved toward the door. There's a room upstairs, second on the left. It's yours for as long as you need it. Dante. He stopped, looked back at her. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time, she believed him. Then he left, and Amara sat alone in that cold, beautiful house, and realized that the cage she had feared was no longer a possibility. It was her reality. If you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The room was too perfect. That was the first thing she noticed when she finally climbed the stairs. The bed was enormous, covered in soft white linens that looked like they'd never been slept in. The furniture was dark wood, polished to a shine. There was a window overlooking the garden, the glass so clean it was almost invisible. It felt like a museum, like a place where people didn't actually live. She set her bag, the one Dante's men had retrieved from her apartment, on the edge of the bed and stood there, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. The real one, not the one Dante had given her. Messages from coworkers asking if she was okay. A missed call from Dr. Patel. A text from her landlord about next month's rent. She turned it off. She didn't know what to tell them. Didn't know how to explain that she was being held in a mansion by a man who claimed he was protecting her. That she wasn't a prisoner, exactly, but she wasn't free either. That she was somewhere in between, suspended in a strange, suffocating limbo. She sat on the edge of the bed and tried not to cry. Dante didn't come to see her that night, or the next. For 2 days, she barely saw him at all. His men brought her meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all of it prepared by someone she never met. They were polite, respectful, but they didn't linger. Didn't speak unless she asked them a question. She felt like a ghost. She tried to leave once, on the second day. Walked down the stairs, through the hallways, toward the front door. But before she even reached it, one of the men stepped in front of her. "Miss Amora," he said gently, "you can't leave." "I'm not a prisoner," she said. "No," he agreed, "but you're not safe out there either." She wanted to scream, wanted to shove past him, run down the driveway, disappear into the trees. But she knew it wouldn't work, knew they would catch her before she made it 10 feet. So she turned around and went back to her room. On the third night, Dante knocked on her door. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the garden, when she heard it. 3 soft taps, deliberate and careful. "Come in," she said without looking. The door opened. She heard his footsteps, quiet on the carpet, and then he was standing beside her. "How are you?" he asked. She laughed bitterly. "How do you think?" He didn't answer, just stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking out the same window. "I know this isn't easy," he said finally. "You don't know anything." "Maybe not." He was quiet for a moment. "But I'm trying." She finally looked at him. He looked tired, more tired than she had seen him before. There were shadows under his eyes, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, like he'd been wearing it too long. "How long am I going to be here?" she asked. "I don't know." "That's not good enough." "It's the truth." She stood, faced him. "I have a life, Dante. A job, bills, people who depend on me. I can't just disappear." "I know." "Then let me go." "I can't." "Why not?" He looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Because if I let you go, they'll kill you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. "Who?" she whispered. "I'm still trying to figure that out." She sank back into the chair, her hands shaking. "This is insane." "Yes," he agreed. "It is." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "There's a library downstairs. Books, movies, whatever you need. You're not a prisoner, Amora. You can go anywhere in the house. Just don't leave." "That's the definition of a prisoner," she said quietly. He didn't argue, just nodded, and left, and she was alone again. She started to explore the house the next day, not because she wanted to, but because sitting in that room was driving her insane. The house was massive, endless hallways, rooms upon rooms, all of them perfectly decorated and perfectly empty. She found the library Dante had mentioned, a 2-story room filled with leather-bound books and a fireplace big enough to stand in. She found a gym, a pool, a room that looked like an office but had no computer, no papers, nothing personal. It was a house designed to look lived in, but it wasn't. She wandered into the kitchen one afternoon and found a woman there, older, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up when Amora entered, smiled warmly. "Oh, hello, Day," she said. "I didn't know you'd be down here." Amora blinked. "Who are you?" "Rosa. I take care of the house." She wiped her hands on a towel. "Can I get you anything? Tea? Something to eat?" "No. I'm fine. Thank you." Rosa nodded, but she didn't leave. Just watched Amora with kind, knowing eyes. "You're the one who saved him," Rosa said softly. Amora nodded. "He talks about you," Rosa said. "Not much, but enough." "What does he say?" Rosa smiled. "That you're brave, that you didn't have to help him, but you did anyway." Amora didn't know what to say to that. "He's a good man," Rosa said. "I know it doesn't seem like it, but he is." Amora wanted to argue, wanted to say that good men didn't hold people captive in their homes, didn't have enemies who tried to kill them on dark highways. But she didn't, because Rosa believed it. And maybe, in some small, dangerous way, Amora was starting to believe it too. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. It was too quiet, too still. She was used to the sounds of the city, sirens, traffic, her neighbor's television. Hey, there was nothing. Just her thoughts. She got up, pulled on a sweater, and wandered downstairs. The house was dark, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the windows. She moved through the hallways like a ghost, not really going anywhere, just moving. And then she saw him. Dante was sitting in the library, in one of the chairs by the fireplace. The fire was low, barely burning, casting flickering shadows across his face. He had a glass of something dark in his hand. Whiskey, maybe. He wasn't reading, wasn't doing anything. Just sitting there, staring into the flames. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "You never could." She moved closer, hesitated, then sat in the chair across from him. They didn't speak for a while. Just sat there in the quiet, the fire crackling softly between them. "I'm sorry," he said finally. She looked at him. "For what?" "For all of this. For dragging you into my world. For making you afraid." "You didn't drag me," she said quietly. "I pulled you out of that car. I made the choice. You didn't know what it would cost." "No," she agreed. "But I still made it." He looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something softer, something almost like gratitude. "You should hate me," he said. "Maybe I should," she whispered. "But I don't." And that was the truth. She didn't hate him. She should, but she didn't, and that scared her more than anything. Time moved strangely in that house. Days bled into each other, unmarked by routine or purpose. Amora woke when she woke, ate when Rosa brought her food, wandered the halls when the silence became unbearable. She read books from the library, watched the rain streak down the windows, and tried not to think about the life she had left behind. But it was always there, hovering at the edges of her mind. The hospital, her patients, the bills she wasn't paying, the world continuing without her. She felt like she was fading, like she was becoming part of the house, another beautiful, empty thing. Dante was different now. He came to see her more often. Not every day, but enough. He would knock on her door in the evenings, ask if she wanted company. Sometimes she said no. Sometimes she said yes. When she said yes, he would sit with her. They didn't talk much at first, just sat in the same room, existing in each other's space. But slowly, gradually, the silence became less heavy, less suffocating. He told her things, small things, about the house, about Rosa, who had worked for his family since he was a child, about the garden, which his mother had planted before she died. He never talked about his work, never talked about the men who wanted him dead, or the world he came from. And she didn't ask, because she wasn't sure she wanted to know. One night, she asked him why he lived alone. They were in the library again. It had become their place, somehow. The fire was burning low, and he was in his usual chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Why do you ask?" he said. "Because this house is huge, and you're the only one in it." He smiled faintly. "I like the space." "That's not an answer." He looked at her, considered. "I don't trust easily." "So you live alone?" "Yes." "Doesn't it get lonely?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, sometimes. She didn't push, but something in his voice made her chest ache. "What about you?" he asked. "What about me? Do you get lonely?" She thought about her tiny apartment, the empty fridge, the nights she came home too tired to do anything but collapse into bed, the silence that felt like drowning. "Yes," she said softly, "all the time." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt something shift between them, something fragile and dangerous. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "That I've made it worse." She shook her head. "You haven't." And that was the truth. Being here, in this strange, suffocating house, should have made her loneliness worse. But it didn't, because for the first time in years, she wasn't alone. She had him, and as terrifying as that was, it was also the only thing keeping her sane. If your heart's racing too, take a breath, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. She started to notice things about him. The way he always poured her tea before his own. The way he listened when she spoke, really listened, like her words mattered. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Something soft and sad in his eyes. He was careful with her. Gentle, even. Like she was something fragile that might break. And maybe she was. One evening, she found him in the garden. She had been walking through the house, restless and aching for fresh air, when she saw him through the window. He was standing by the fountain, his coat pulled tight against the cold, staring at nothing. She grabbed a sweater and went outside. He turned when he heard her footsteps on the gravel. "You'll freeze," he said. "So will you." He smiled at that. A real smile, the kind that made him look younger. Fair point. She stood beside him, looking at the fountain. The water had stopped running for the winter, and the basin was filled with dead leaves. "Your mother planted this garden?" she asked. "Yes." "What was she like?" He was quiet for a moment. "Kind. Too kind for the world she was born into." "Like you." He laughed bitterly. "I'm not kind, Amora. You are to me." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "That's different." "Why?" He didn't answer, just turned back to the fountain, his jaw tight. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "How do you know?" "Because she always believed people were more than the worst thing they'd ever done. That everyone deserved a second chance." He paused. "You remind me of her." Amora felt her throat tighten. "I'm not that good." "You're better than you think." She didn't know what to say to that. So she just stood there, beside him, and let the cold wind blow through the garden. "I'm trying to find them," he said quietly. "The people who are after you. After me. I have my best men on it. But it's taking time." "How much time?" "I don't know." She nodded. She had expected that answer. "I want to go home, Dante," she said softly. "I know. But I can't." "No. Not yet." She looked at him, at the sharp lines of his face, the sadness in his eyes. "Do you ever feel trapped?" "Every day of my life." The honesty in his voice startled her. "Then why do you stay?" she asked. "Because I don't know how to be anything else." They stood there in the cold, two people trapped in different cages, and for the first time, Amara understood him. Really understood him. He wasn't a villain, wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had been born into a world he didn't choose, and he was trying to survive it the only way he knew how. Just like her. That night, she dreamed of fire. She was back on the highway, pulling Dante from the burning car. But this time, the flames didn't stop. They spread, consumed the road, the trees, the sky. And no matter how hard she ran, she couldn't escape them. She woke gasping, her sheets tangled around her legs, her heart pounding. There was a knock on the door. "Amora." Dante's voice, quiet and concerned. She sat up, tried to steady her breathing. "Come in." He opened the door, stepped inside. He was still dressed, like he hadn't slept either. "I heard you," he said. "Are you okay?" She nodded, even though she wasn't. "Just a bad dream." He moved closer, hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No." He nodded, didn't push, just sat there, his presence solid and grounding. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of staying here forever, of forgetting who I was before all this." She looked at him. "Of forgetting that I'm supposed to hate you." He smiled sadly. "You don't have to hate me, Amora, but you don't have to trust me either." "I know," she whispered, "but I think I'm starting to." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out, slowly, carefully, and took her hand. His touch was warm. Steady. You're safe here, he said. I promise. And for the first time since she arrived, she believed him. The days began to blur together in a way that felt almost peaceful. Almost. Amara woke to the smell of coffee Rosa left outside her door. She spent her mornings in the library, reading books she'd never had time for before. In the afternoons, she walked the halls, traced her fingers along the spines of untouched volumes, stared out windows at a world she could see but not touch. And in the evenings, Dante came to her. It was routine now. He would knock, she would let him in, and they would sit together in comfortable silence or talk about nothing important. He told her about the roses his mother used to grow. She told him about her first day at nursing school, how terrified she'd been of making a mistake. They were learning each other, slowly, carefully, like two people walking on ice, afraid of what might break beneath them. But the world outside didn't stop. Dante's men came and went, their faces grim, their voices low. She heard fragments of conversations through closed doors, names she didn't recognize, places that meant nothing to her. Dante grew quieter, more tense. The lightness that had started to appear in his eyes began to fade. Something was happening. She didn't ask. She had learned by now that there were parts of his life he would never let her see. But she felt the weight of it, the pressure building like a storm. One night, she woke to shouting. It was distant, muffled by walls and distance, but unmistakable. Men's voices, sharp and angry. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, straining to hear. Then silence. She waited, barely breathing, but nothing else came. In the morning, Dante didn't come to see her. Or the next night, she wandered the house looking for him, but he was never there. Only his men, standing guard, their faces unreadable. When she asked Rosa where he was, the older woman just smiled sadly and told her he was working. But Amora knew better. Something had changed. On the third night, she found him. He was in his office, a room she had only seen once, briefly, when Rosa was giving her a tour. The door was cracked open, and she could see him through the gap. He was sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, papers scattered in front of him. He looked exhausted. She knocked softly. He looked up, and for a moment, she saw something raw in his face. Something broken. Amara, he said, his voice rough. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her. What's wrong? Nothing. Don't lie to me. He leaned back in his chair, ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated. He smiled faintly at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. Faye. She moved closer, sat in the chair across from his desk. Talk to me. He was quiet for a long time. Then, they found you. Her stomach dropped. What? Not here. But they know you exist. They know I'm hiding you. And they're using that to get to me. How? They're threatening people I care about. People who work for me. Telling them that if they don't give you up, there will be consequences. She felt cold. So give me up. He looked at her like she'd slapped him. What? If I'm the problem, then let me go. Let me leave. I'll disappear. They'll forget about me. They won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His voice was hard now, final. Once they know about you, you're a target, whether you're with me or not. The only difference is, if you're with me, I can protect you. And if you can't. He didn't answer. She stood, her hands shaking. This is insane, Dante. You can't keep me locked up here forever. You can't control everything. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. He stood, moved around the desk toward her. I know it's not, but it's all I have. Then it's not good enough, she whispered. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of him. "What do you want me to do, Amora? Let you go? Watch you walk out of here knowing they'll find you, knowing they'll kill you to hurt me? Maybe that's not your choice to make. It is when your life is on the line." She looked up at him, her eyes burning. "You don't own me." "I never said I did." "Then stop acting like it." He stayed at her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. And then, quietly, "I can't lose you." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. "What?" "I can't lose you," he said again, his voice breaking. "I've lost everyone I've ever cared about. Everyone. And I won't let that happen again." She felt her breath catch. "Dante." "I know it's selfish," he said. "I know I'm asking too much. But I don't care. I need you safe, even if you hate me for it." She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to the raw, desperate honesty in his voice. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. "I don't hate you," she said softly. "You should." "I know." She smiled sadly. "But I don't." He closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry." "I know." They stood there in the dim light of his office, holding onto each other like lifelines, and Amara realized something that terrified her. She wasn't just his captive anymore. She was his anchor, and he was hers. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. The house felt smaller after that night. Not physically, but in the way the air seemed thicker, the silences heavier. Dante's confession hung between them like smoke, something you couldn't see but couldn't escape either. She didn't know what to do with it, with the knowledge that she mattered to him, that he cared about her in a way that went beyond obligation or guilt. It should have made her feel powerful, but instead, it just made her feel trapped. Because now she wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid for him too. The men came more frequently now. She heard them in the hallways, saw them through windows, their faces drawn and serious. They spoke in low voices, always just out of earshot, and Dante was with them more often than not. He looked tired, more than tired, worn down, like he was carrying the weight of something too heavy to hold. She tried to talk to him, but he kept his distance, polite, gentle, but distant, like he was building walls again. And she hated it. One afternoon, Rosa found her sitting in the garden. "You look troubled, dear," the older woman said, sitting down on the bench beside her. Amora didn't deny it. "I don't know what I'm doing here anymore." "You're staying alive." "Is that enough?" Rosa smiled sadly. "Sometimes it has to be." Amora looked at her. "How long have you known him?" "Since he was a boy. I watched him grow up, watched him become the man he is now." "What was he like before all this?" Rosa was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant, gentle, curious. He used to ask so many questions, about everything, the world, people, why things were the way they were. She sighed, but then his father died, and everything changed. How? He had to become someone else, someone harder, someone who could survive in a world that wanted to destroy him. She looked at Amora, but he's still that boy, underneath, still asking questions, still looking for something to hold on to. "Like what?" Rosa smiled. "Like you." Amora's throat tightened. "I don't think I can be that for him." "You already are." That night, everything fell apart. She was in her room, reading, when she heard the crash. It was loud, violent, the sound of something breaking. She dropped her book and ran to the door, her heart pounding. The hallway was chaos. Men were shouting, running, their faces grim. She heard gunfire, sharp, deafening cracks that made her ears ring. She pressed herself against the wall, her hands shaking, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then she saw him. Dante was at the end of the hall, blood on his shirt, a gun in his hand. He was barking orders, his voice hard and commanding. He looked up and saw her, and his face went white. "Amara, get back inside," he shouted. But before she could move, one of his men grabbed her arm, pulled her down the hallway in the opposite direction. "Wait," she started to say, but the man didn't let go. "We have to get you out," he said. "Now." "What's happening?" "They found the house." Her blood turned to ice. He pulled her through a side door, down a narrow staircase she didn't know existed. They moved fast, his grip on her arm tight, almost bruising. She could still hear the gunfire, still hear the shouting, but it was getting fainter. They emerged into a garage. There were cars everywhere, sleek and black, engines already running. "Get in," the man said, opening the door to one of them. She hesitated. "What about Dante?" "He'll be fine. Get in." She got in. The car peeled out of the garage, tires squealing, and she looked back through the rear window. The house was lit up, smoke pouring from one of the upper floors. She saw figures moving in the shadows, heard more gunfire, and then they turned a corner, and the house disappeared from view. They drove for hours. She didn't know where they were going. The man didn't speak, didn't answer her questions, just drove, his jaw tight, his eyes on the road. Finally, they stopped. It was a small house, tucked away in the middle of nowhere. Trees surrounded it on all sides. There were no lights, no signs of life. "Stay here," the man said. "Don't leave. Don't call anyone. We'll come for you when it's safe." "When will that be?" "I don't know." And then he was gone. She stood in the empty house, surrounded by silence, and felt her legs give out. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and let the tears come. She didn't know if Dante was alive, didn't know if she would ever see him again. All she knew was that the world had finally caught up to them, and it had torn them apart. The house was silent, not peaceful, just empty, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears, made you hear your own heartbeat too loudly. Amora didn't sleep that first night. She sat on the floor of the living room, her back against the wall, watching the door like something might come through it at any moment. Every sound made her flinch, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind through the trees. She kept thinking about Dante, about the blood on his shirt, the gunfire, the way his face had gone white when he saw her in the hallway. She didn't know if he was alive, and the not knowing was worse than anything. By the second day, she forced herself to move. She explored the house. It was small, sparse, functional. A kitchen with a stocked pantry, a bedroom with a single bed, a bathroom with clean towels. Everything she needed to survive, but nothing that felt like living. There was no phone, no television, no internet. Just silence and time and the weight of her own thoughts. She tried to distract herself. Cooked meals she didn't eat. Read the handful of books left on a shelf. Stayed out the window at the endless trees. But it didn't work, because all she could think about was him. On the third day, she broke. She was standing in the kitchen, trying to make tea, when her hand started shaking. The cup slipped from her fingers, shattered on the floor, and she just stayed at the pieces. And then she couldn't stop. She sank to the floor, her hands in her hair, and sobbed. Great, heaving sobs that tore through her chest and left her gasping for air. She cried for Dante, for herself, for the life she'd lost and the one she was trapped in now. She cried until there was nothing left. And then she sat there, in the broken glass and the silence, and felt something inside her harden. She couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't sit in this house, waiting, not knowing. Couldn't let fear control her. She had spent her whole life being careful, playing it safe, surviving instead of living. And look where it had gotten her. So she made a decision. If they came for her, she would face them. And if Dante was dead, she would find a way to move on. But she wouldn't wait anymore. On the 5th day, the door opened. She was sitting on the couch, a book in her lap, when she heard the lock turn. Her heart leapt into her throat. She stood, her body tense, ready to run or fight or whatever she needed to do. And then he walked in. Dante. Alive. He looked terrible. There was a fresh bandage on his arm, bruises on his face, exhaustion etched into every line of his body. But he was alive. She felt something break open inside her chest. Amara, he said, his voice rough. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around him. He staggered back, caught off guard, but then his arms came up and wrapped around her, holding her tight. She felt his breath against her hair, felt the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. I thought you were dead, she whispered. I'm not. I thought. I'm here. His voice was soft, almost broken. I'm here. They stood there, holding each other, and Amara realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. She loved him, not the way she thought love was supposed to feel, soft and safe and easy, but the way it actually felt, messy and terrifying and impossible to ignore. She loved him, and that changed everything. He pulled back finally, his hands on her shoulders, looking at her like he was making sure she was real. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. Are you? I've been better. He smiled faintly. But I'm alive. That's what matters. What happened? His face darkened. They came for me. For you. We fought them off. But... He trailed off, his jaw tight. It's not over. What does that mean? It means they know where we were, and they'll keep looking. He looked at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't name. I have to end this, Amara. I have to find out who's behind it and stop them. For good. How? I don't know yet, but I will. She believed him, because if there was one thing she had learned about Dante Moetti, it was that he didn't give up. What do we do now? She asked. We stay here, for a little while longer, until I know it's safe. And then... He looked at her for a long moment. Then we figure it out. Together. She nodded. Together. It was the first time he'd said it like that. Like she was part of his plans. Part of his life. Not just someone he was protecting, but someone he wanted beside him. And for the first time since this all started, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like she had a choice. The days that followed were different. Dante didn't leave her side. Not because he was keeping her captive, but because he didn't want to. They moved through the small house together, the routines overlapping, the silences comfortable. He cooked breakfast. She made coffee. They sat at the small table and ate without speaking, the morning light filtering through the windows. It felt almost normal. Almost. But Dante was always tense. Always watching. Even when he was sitting beside her, reading or just staring into space, she could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was planning something. She didn't ask. She had learned by now that he would tell her when he was ready. One night, he found her in the bedroom, sitting by the window, staring out at the dark trees. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. You? No. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. They sat in silence for a while, watching the shadows shift outside. I found them, he said finally. She looked at him. Who? The people who tried to kill me. Who came after you. His voice was hard, controlled. I know who they are now. What are you going to do? What I have to. She felt her stomach twist. Dante. I'm not going to hurt you, Amara. I promise. But I can't let them keep coming. I have to end this. How? I'm going to meet with them. Tomorrow night. Her blood ran cold. That's a trap. I know. Then why? Because it's the only way. He turned to her, his eyes fierce. If I don't face them, they'll keep hunting. They'll keep using you to get to me. And I won't let that happen. So you're just going to walk into a trap. I'll have my men with me. I'll be careful. Careful isn't enough. It's all I have. She grabbed his hand, held it tight. Don't do this. I have to. No, you don't. We can run. We can disappear. Start over somewhere they'll never find us. He smiled sadly. You know it doesn't work like that. Then make it work. Amora. Please. Her voice broke. I can't lose you. He stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something raw and unguarded. You won't, he said quietly. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He reached up, cupped her face in his hand. Because I'm not going to let anything happen to me. Not when I have you waiting for me. She felt tears prick at her eyes. That's not a promise you can make. Watch me. And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was giving her a chance to pull away. But she didn't. She leaned into him, her hands clutching his shirt, and kissed him back with everything she had. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't soft or gentle or any of the things she'd imagined a first kiss should be. It was desperate and messy and real. And it was theirs. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. I'm coming back, he whispered. You better. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that made her chest ache. I will, he promised. I swear. He left the next morning. She watched from the window as he got into the car, his men surrounding him. He looked up at her one last time, gave her a small nod, and then he was gone. She stood there long after the car disappeared, her hand pressed against the glass. And then she waited. The hours dragged by. She tried to distract herself, cleaned the house, made food she didn't eat, read the same page of a book over and over without absorbing a single word. But all she could think about was him, about the way he had kissed her, the way he had looked at her when he promised he would come back. She had to believe him, because if she didn't, she would fall apart. Night fell. She sat on the couch, her phone, the one he'd given her, clutched in her hand. He'd told her not to call unless it was an emergency, told her he would reach out when it was over. But he hadn't, and the silence was killing her. She stayed at the phone, willing it to ring, willing him to call, to text, to give her any sign that he was okay. But nothing came. And then, at midnight, the door opened. She shot to her feet, her heart in her throat. Dante stumbled inside, his face pale, his shirt soaked with blood. Oh my God, she breathed, rushing to him. He caught himself against the doorframe, his breath labored. I'm okay. You're not okay. You're bleeding. It's not mine. He looked up at her, his eyes fierce. It's over, Amora. It's done. She stared at him, her hand shaking. What? They're gone. All of them. They can't hurt you anymore. She felt her knees give out, and he caught her, pulled her against him. It's over, he said again, his voice breaking. I told you I'd come back. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, not from fear, not from relief, but from the overwhelming, terrifying realization that she had found something she never thought she would. Someone who would walk into fire for her, someone who had, and someone she would do the same for. They didn't talk about it that night. Dante was too exhausted, too battered. She cleaned his wounds in silence, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. He sat still, letting her wake, watching her face with something soft in his eyes. When she was done, she helped him to the bedroom. He collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, and she sat beside him, her hand in his, until his breathing evened out and he finally slept. She didn't. She sat there in the dark, watching him, making sure he was still breathing. making sure he was real. It was over. He had said it was over. But she didn't know what that meant. Didn't know what came next. In the morning, he was different. Not broken. Not weak. Just quiet. Thoughtful. Like he was still processing what had happened. What he had done. They sat at the small kitchen table, coffee between them, and the silence was heavy. What happened? She asked finally. He looked up at her, his eyes tired. I confronted them. The ones who wanted me dead. The ones who knew about you. Anne. I gave them a choice. Stop, or I would end it. For good. Did they stop? He was quiet for a long moment. Some did. She understood what he wasn't saying. Dante. I'm not a good man, Amora, he said quietly. I've done things I can't take back. Things I'm not proud of. But I did what I had to do to protect you. To protect us. I know. Does that scare you? She thought about it. About the man sitting across from her. The man who had pulled her into his world, kept her captive, made her care about him despite everything. Yes, she said honestly, but not the way you think. What do you mean? I'm scared because I understand it. Because I would have done the same thing if our positions were reversed. She looked at him, and that scares me more than anything. He reached across the table, took her hand. You're not like me. Maybe not, but I'm not as different as I used to think. He held her gaze for a long moment, then squeezed her hand gently. What happens now? She asked. That's up to you. She blinked. What? You're free, Amora. You can go home. Go back to your life. I'll make sure you're safe. No one will come after you again. And if I don't want to go? He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. What? I said, what if I don't want to go? Amora. I'm not saying I want to stay in hiding forever, but... She took a breath. I don't want to lose this. Lose you. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. She leaned forward. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not alone. Like someone actually sees me. And I don't want to give that up just because it's complicated or dangerous or insane. He stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Maybe. But I don't want better. I want real. Amora. I love you, she said. The words hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. He closed his eyes, his jaw tight. Don't. Why not? Because loving me will only hurt you. I don't care. You should. Well, I don't. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Dante, and I'm not taking it back. He opened his eyes, looked at her, and she saw tears there. Actual tears. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not. But you have me anyway. He pulled her across the table, into his arms, and held her like she might disappear. I love you too, he said against her hair. God help me, I love you too. And Amora felt something settle inside her. Not peace. Not happiness. Exactly. But certainty. This was where she belonged. With him. In all the mess and danger and impossible beauty of it. 6 months later, Amora stood in the garden of a house she had never imagined living in. Not Dante's mansion. That was gone. Sold to someone who would never know its ghosts. This house was smaller. Warmer. Tucked away in the countryside where the world moved slower and the nights were filled with stars instead of sirens. The roses were blooming. She knelt beside them, her hands in the soil, and thought about Dante's mother, about the woman who had planted gardens in dark places and believed in second chances. She understood her now. Behind her, she heard footsteps on the gravel. You're going to get dirt all over that dress, Dante said. She looked up at him, smiled. Then I guess you'll have to buy me another one. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind that made him look younger, lighter. He'd changed in the months since that night. Not completely. He still carried the weight of his past, still had nightmares sometimes that woke them both in the dark. But he was trying, learning how to live instead of just survive. They both were. He sat down beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. Rosa called. She wants to know if we're coming for dinner next week. Of course we are. We go every week. She worries. She loves you. She loves you too. He looked at her. Everyone does. She leaned against him, felt his arm come around her. I'm happy, she said quietly. Yeah. Yeah. He kissed the top of her head. Good. They sat there in the garden, surrounded by roses and sunlight and the gentle hum of life continuing. It wasn't perfect. It was never going to be perfect. But it was theirs. And that was enough. Amora still worked at the hospital. Different city, different building, but the same calling. She saved lives, held hands, reminded people that they weren't alone. And when she came home at night, Dante was there, cooking dinner, reading in the library they'd built together, waiting for her. They talked about everything and nothing. About the past, sometimes, though less and less. About the future more often. About the life they were building, one day at a time. He asked her once if she regretted it, pulling him from that burning car. She said no, because the truth was, that night hadn't just saved his life. It had saved hers too. She had spent so long feeling invisible, like she was just moving through the world without leaving a mark. But Dante saw her, really saw her, and in seeing her, he had reminded her that she mattered, that her life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, and loving, and being brave enough to hold on to something real, even when it scared her. One night, as they lay in bed, Dante's hand tracing laser patterns on her arm, he said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd kept driving that night?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "Do you wish you had?" She turned to face him, looked into his dark eyes. "No, never." He smiled, that soft, genuine smile that was just for her. "Good. Do you?" "Do I what?" "Wish I'd kept driving." He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Not for a second. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who had found something impossible in the ruins of their old lives. And when morning came, they woke together, ready to face whatever came next. Together. The world kept spinning. People kept living and dying and falling in love and breaking apart. The sun kept rising. The seasons kept changing. And in a small house in the countryside, Amora and Dante built a life. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. She had dragged him from a burning car on a dark highway, and by sunrise, his men had surrounded her home. But it hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning of everything. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again.